All right, if you're near Minnesota, Wisconsin, come to RLJ CDL Services. So this is a 2020. So essentially, you always start out your pre-trip with the leaking lights, and I'm going to do section A or here on a 2020. Okay, so right now you start from the top. This is your coolant. Okay, I got the proper fluid level. Okay, between max and minimum right here. Cap is on tight. It's not cracked and it's not leaking. I have my alternator. Okay, my alternator is belt driven. It's securely mounted, not missing any hardwares. It's not cracked or bent. I've got my belt. My belt is securely mounted. Okay, it's not cut. There's no holes and no more than 3/4 of an inch play when you depress it. Okay. So then I'm going to talk about my water pump. Okay, my water pump is right here. It is gear driven. And it's not cracked, it's not missing any hardware, securely mounted, and it's not leaking. All right, so after that, what I want to talk about is my fluid hoses. Okay, here's one fluid hoses. You want to talk about all of your fluid hoses. None of them are cut, they're not leaking, and they're securely mounted on both ends. And I want to talk about my air line here. Okay, my air line is securely mounted on both ends, no signs of rubbing, no cuts, and no audible air leaks. Okay, now I want to talk about my electric. I know that my headlights are electric, so all my electrical lines are securely mounted on both ends, not cut, and no signs of copper wire exposed. Okay, so after that, what I want to do is move on to the other side. All right, so essentially what I want to do is I want to start with my oil. Okay, my oil has its safety chain on it. Okay, the cap is on tight, it's not cracked, and it's not leaking. This is where you add oil. This is my dipstick. Okay, my dipstick is securely mounted, it's not bent or cracked, and it's not leaking any oil. If I want to check my oil level, I want to take this out, clean it. I want to put it back in, pull it out, and check my oil level between add and full. Okay, so then I go to my air compressor. All right, my air compressor is securely mounted. It's not missing any hardware, not cracked, and it's not leaking. Okay, it can either leak fluid or air on that one. Okay, then I want to go to my steering linkage. All right, so my steering linkage starts with my steering shaft. Okay, my steering shaft has no more than 10 degrees of play, securely mounted on both ends, not bent or cracked. This is my U-joints. My U-joints are securely mounted, not missing any hardware, free from debris, properly greased. Then I want to talk about my power steering gearbox. Okay, not missing any hardware, it's not cracked, it's not bent, securely mounted to the frame, and it's a fluid gear driven power steering gearbox. Okay, so you follow this line back to your power steering pump back here. Okay, and you want to make sure that your power steering pump is securely mounted, it's not cracked or bent, and it is gear driven. Okay, so follow this line again, and it leads you to your power steering reservoir. So here's your power steering pump right there. Okay, power steering reservoir is right here. Cap is on tight, proper fluid level. I want to use the dipstick. Okay, never do it. Make sure it's between add and full. It's securely mounted, not cracked, and not leaking. All right, so then I want to go to my pitman arm, not bent, cracked, securely mounted on both ends. This is my drag link. Okay, that's my drag link, securely mounted on both ends, not bent or cracked, free from debris. I've got my castle nut and cotter pin intact. You've got your upper steer arm, and then you've got your lower steer arm. Okay, not bent or cracked, securely mounted, not missing any hardware. The castle nut and cotter pin are intact on both my upper and lower steer arm. Now I've got my tie rod. My tie rod securely mounted on both ends, not missing any hardware, not bent or cracked. So that would be the steering linkage. Just boom. Okay, power steering pump right here. power steering fluid, and then pitman arm, drag link, upper and lower steer arm, and then you got your tie rod. Now I'm going to go to my suspension system. Underneath here, you see your, so you can see your spring leaf here. Then you've got your spring leaf mount right here, okay? Securely mounted to the frame, not missing any hardware, not bent or cracked. I've got my spring leaf here. My spring leaf has no more than 25% damage. It's right there. So my spring leaf has no more than 25% damage, securely mounted on both ends. It's not scissoring, and it's securely mounted. Okay, so my U-bolts, okay, my U-bolts are securely mounted, not missing any hardware, not bent or cracked. Okay, and then you got your shock absorber here, securely mounted on both ends. It's not loose. My rubber bushings are intact, and it's not leaking. All right. So that's your suspension system. Okay. Now we want to talk about our frame too. Our frame is not bent or cracked. No illegal welds. No illegal holes. Typically, I do the frame before I do the suspension system. Okay. Now I want to talk about the braking system, the brake chamber. Okay, I want to start with the air lines. So I talk about all of my air lines. All of my air lines are securely mounted on both ends. No cuts, no signs of rubbing, not leaking any air. I want to talk about all my fluid lines. All my fluid lines are securely mounted on both ends. No signs of rubbing, no cuts, not leaking any fluid. All of my electrical lines, securely mounted on both ends. No signs of rubbing, no cuts, no copper wires exposed. Okay, then I go to my brake chamber. My brake chamber is securely mounted. My seat clamp is intact. It's not bent or cracked and not leaking any air. Okay, my slack adjuster and my push rod. This is my push rod. This right here is my slack adjuster. They're securely mounted, not bent or cracked. No more than a 1 inch of play on my push rod and slack adjuster, and I'm not missing any cotter pins. Okay, so then after that we talk about our brake pad. No less than a quarter, securely mounted. I'm not missing any brake pads. No grease. Okay, brake drum, securely mounted. Brake drum is not blue in color. There's no rust on the inside, and it is not bent, and there's no grease leaking. All right, you're going to talk about your inner rim, your inner tire. No more than 430 seconds, no uneven wear, no debris. Talk about your outer tire, no bulges, no cuts, no nails. It's the same as your inner tire, okay? And then you want to find your PSI, which is right here, okay, right here. It's cold, no less than 123 PSI, which brings you to your valve stem, not bent, cap is on. No leaking any air. Talk about your lug nuts, securely mounted, no gaps, no more cracked or missing. Talk about your rim, no illegal welds, no illegal holes, securely mounted to the tire. Talk about your hub seal not missing any hardware, securely mounted, no cracks, and it's not leaking any fluid, okay? Most of them you have to have checked by a certified mechanic. And that would be Section A.